Hi, folks. This is Mark by Mark A. Foster, Ph.D., for the Institute for Dialectical Meta-Realism. Mettā and Maitrī are respectively Pali and Sanskrit words for either loving kindness or compassion. They are used in Buddhism, but I am not a Buddhist, and I use them all the time. So, in the context of Maoism-Third Worldism, or as I sometimes prefer, socialism from below, third worldism, fourth worldism, it is vital. It is vital that in our conscientization, we exercise Mettā or Maitrī. Vital. Without compassion, without loving kindness, people in the third world, and I would say perhaps especially in the fourth world, are likely to ignore us. And indeed they should. Nobody likes to be preached at. I know I don't, but especially people in the fourth world, indigenous people, people who have been stomped on their entire lives and throughout much of their histories, especially by people who are labeled as white. And as I've said, even though I identify as a brown person of color, since like my Arab brothers and sisters, I am an Ashkenazi Jew, and Ashkenazi Jews, like Arabs, I think should be seen as brown people of color. I feel a responsibility to be sensitive to the needs and the requirements of people in the third and in the fourth world. Because if I am not sensitive, then who else will be sensitive? In other words, when I look around me and I see the tremendous dislocation of things, literally the world appears to be falling apart. People are looking for answers to the most perplexing problems, perhaps the most perplexing problems that we have ever encountered as a species. And the answers are nowhere to be found. But without Mettā or Maitrī, who cares what I think? People, especially people in the third and fourth worlds, but for that matter, people in the first world as well, may totally ignore me. And I would not be surprised at all. In fact, I think that they should ignore me, because knowledge without heart is entirely useless. Communism. What is communism? It is communion. It is a coming together in union. That is how I see communism. And if I want to come together in union with my third world and fourth world humans, fellow humans on this planet, then I need to speak to them, with them, where they are, not where I am. I need to meet them where they are. People often say, well, let's see if we can meet halfway. To heck with that. I cannot meet people from the third world or the fourth world halfway. I am an extraordinarily privileged first worlder, much more privileged than most first worlders. I am wealthy. I have a Ph.D. I am a retired college professor. For me, to meet somebody halfway would be an insult. It would not be a reflection of Mettā or Maitrī. So No, I cannot meet somebody from the third world or the fourth world halfway. I need to go all the way and meet them where they are. I need to practice intersubjectivity, and the burden for that needs to fall on me, meaning I need to open up my heart to them, to see them as they are, to recognize them, their struggles, their problems, their difficulties, and inevitably, people in the third world or fourth world, unless they are from a very privileged, wealthy background, have a lot of problems, much more than my problems. What I think of as a problem, and I actually call them problems. Sometimes I feel like, how do I have the nerve to call what I experience as a problem? They are not problems when viewed alongside the enormous difficulties which are experienced on a daily basis by the vast majority of people who live in the third world and the fourth world. I have a relatively stress-free life. I complain that I am living in a very corrupt part of the United States, which is true. I complain that sometimes I wish that I could pick up and move someplace else, although I don't think I will do that, which is also true. Those are minor. Those are minor. Look at Gaza. The vast majority of homes in Gaza have been destroyed. There is basically nothing left to the lives of many Palestinians living in Gaza. Nothing. Their homes are gone. Their businesses are gone. In some cases, their entire families are gone. They may be small children without parents, without siblings, and without grandparents. Where do they turn? The answer is, I don't know. I am not there. I cannot substitute for that person's parent, for that person's grandparent. I have never had my own children as an autistic, so I would not know exactly what to do anyway. And yet, I look at these daily tragedies that occur in Gaza, and I compare them with what I think are problems in my own life. And I feel sometimes that I am perhaps the most selfish being alive. Now, realistically, am I? I guess not. I guess not. But regardless, I have no right to consider my own problems and to focus on them so much that I forget the suffering that people in the third world and the fourth world endure on a regular basis. Especially right now, as I've said many times, my heart is with the Gazans. I cannot meet them. I cannot speak with them. I would not be allowed into Gaza. I might not even be allowed into Israel right now. I don't know what the situation is with people visiting Israel from the United States, given that there is a war going on right now. So I might not even be allowed in, and I would not be surprised if that is the case, but I have no recourse. What can I do? I can't appeal it. So I am stuck. I am stuck. And when I say I'm stuck, I'm not complaining. When I say I'm stuck, I mean that I feel powerless to help souls that I genuinely love, but have never met. And what I've realized over the last, well, I guess especially 20 years of my life, since I've been more in touch with myself, with my feelings, with my heart, with my intersubjectivity, I realize that I have so much to be grateful for and basically nothing to complain about at all. And yet, do I complain? You bet. I complain all the time, especially on the phone with my friends. And then afterwards, I think about what I just did, and I feel like I have committed a crime. How dare I complain about my situation, considering the suffering of so many people who have been cut off from all love, from all hope, from all sustenance in the part of the world where they live, particularly right now in Gaza, where, as I've said before, even if that war were to end today, where would the Gazans go? There is nowhere for them to go. And that is the thing that I have to deal with in my head all the time, that I know that there are my fellow humans, the Gazans, my brothers, the Gazans, who are suffering under relentless pain, and yet I am powerless to alleviate it. I think sometimes that the greatest test or trial that can, or perhaps even should, come to a human being is the realization that other people are suffering, but I cannot put myself in the place of that person, because I would gladly put myself in the place of a Gazan right now if someone asked me. Problem. That is idealism. That is ontological idealism, and I am not an idealist. I am a realist. Realistically, whatever I think, whatever I want, whatever I believe is basically meaningless. Who cares? I will sometimes say this to people, that I feel so grateful sometimes for what I have, but I don't feel worthy of it. I ask myself, why was I lucky enough to become a wealthy man, and without even trying to be a wealthy man? I never planned it out. I never chose my investments. It was a matter of pure luck. That's all it was luck. So I really have nothing to complain about. I am living a privileged life of a man, an elderly man in the first world, the head of the capitalist world system, the dying capitalist world system. And despite that, despite the privileges that I have, the unjustifiable privileges I have, when I say that to many people, they say, oh, you should not feel bad. You should feel grateful. I don't know how to feel grateful when other people are suffering, because when I think of feeling grateful. I think of being grateful for the pleasures of others, not for myself. And the idea of being grateful for my material success, however inadvertent it was, is incomprehensible to me when I sit down and carefully contemplate. Sadly, I often do not do that. As I said, I am often self-centered. I often focus on myself, on my own comfort, on my own troubles, on my own pains. And I literally have no right to do that. Not when there are so many people in such dire pain, perhaps on the verge of death throughout the world, in the third world and in the fourth world. So I ask myself sometimes, what does it mean to me to be a Maoist third worldist? I can answer that in multiple ways, but I think the most important thing I can say is what it means to me is Mettā or Maitrī, loving kindness. That is what it means. But sadly, I often feel like I am bereft of that. I do not have enough. I am basically a wannabe, Maoist third worldist. I am not really as caring and as compassionate for the third world and for the fourth world as I should be. I know that. I see it every day. By the same token, I recognize that I am not alone. I am not the only person in my situation. How many people in the first world genuinely care about people living and suffering in the third world and the fourth world? I mean, I don't know, but if I had to guess, I would say not very many, not many at all. Most people are content to focus on their own needs, on their own friends, their own families, and ignore the suffering of the truly disadvantaged ones who live in the third world and the fourth world, including the fourth world here in the US. Places I have seen the dire poverty that exists in the fourth world in the US. I am not qualified to say whether it is better or worse than the dire poverty which exists in the fourth world, in the third world. I don't know that. But pain is pain. And I know that for all the things that I may complain about, I am not in pain. I benefit from all the things that the world has to offer. But I benefit too much. Too much. More than I should. I should not have the privileges that I do. Why, for instance, do I have that sense of love where I can sit down, relax, close my eyes, and experience a sense of connectedness with beings in this world and beyond this world? I have known many people, many third worlders and fourth worlders who would like to do that. They would, If only they had the time, if only they had the ability to do it amidst all the problems that they faced day in and day out. And so, in a way, for me, even experiencing pain, even experiencing suffering is a privilege, because that shows that I have time to reflect upon the suffering that goes on around me. And although it may not be entirely comfortable at the time, it is still a privilege. It is always a privilege to experience the pain of others, always. But all too often, people who are living in the third and fourth worlds, what Frantz Fanon called the wretched of the earth, they don't have that. That is not something that is at their disposal. All they know is sorrow. They see people die around them. Again, in Gaza, my heart returns again and again to Gaza, as it well should. When I see babies in incubators being bombed, when I see people without any hope at all. Meanwhile, people in the first world are debating whether war crimes should be brought on certain officials. Why is that an issue? Shouldn't the answer to that question be obvious? That war crimes should be brought against certain officials? But aside from that, however many war crimes charges we bring against those officials, it will not alleviate the suffering and the pain that is experienced by people like the people in Gaza. Their pain will continue even if the most horrendous war crimes charges are brought against the persecutors of Gazans. Their pain will go on. There is no real, as I can see it, imminent prospect for relief from that pain. And again, what I wish more than anything in the world is that I could put myself in place of those people, or if not that, go to that part of the world and serve them. There is nothing greater, in my view, than servitude. Servitude to the meek, servitude to the wretched of the earth. But unfortunately, I am trapped. I am trapped in the first world. I am trapped in a place of relative luxury where I go down to Mexico, but I can come back. Whereas a lot of people living in Mexico, they can't leave. They're stuck there. They're stuck there. And as I spoke with a guy from Mexico one time when he came to a fair right here in Texas, in the Rio Grande Valley of Texas, I asked him a kind of foolish question, I guess, but I was trying to get a conversation started. I said, "Do you like Mexico?" His response was, "No, no, it is very, very dangerous." And then I realized instantly what a stupid question. What a stupid question I asked him. Even though I was trying to stimulate a conversation, so what? It was still a stupid question. About 6 months ago, there was a raid, and I wondered where the raid was conducted. But then I found out. Now, I won't mention what the business was, but it was a particular business in McAllen, Texas, 3 miles from where I am right now in Mission, Texas. Exactly 3 miles, because I have clocked it. Why was that raid conducted? Well, Border Patrol, I assume, got a tip that there were some people working, I guess, in this particular place who did not have proper papers, who were, quote unquote, undocumented. And I thought to myself, how can a person, how can a human being be undocumented? There is no such thing as an undocumented person. And yet that is the assumption that Border Patrol goes on. And so they conducted a raid of the store. I don't know what happened to the Mexicans who were working there with improper papers, counterfeit papers. But I know the guy who owns the place is still there. He still owns the place. He still runs it. He has apparently found Americans to work there. As a result of that one incident, many businesses all over the Rio Grande Valley of Texas, and if you look on a map, you will see how large the Rio Grande Valley of Texas truly is. Many businesses here in the Rio Grande Valley of Texas stopped hiring Mexicans because they did not want to have a similar incident happen in their place. And so, who was really harmed? Well, I might say that my friend who owns that place was harmed, and he was to an extent. He told me that because of that incident, that he may have to go out of business eventually. So far, he has not. But he lives basically on the margin. It is always, he says, a day-to-day affair, whether he can continue his business or not. And so I think of him. Yes, he was certainly hurt by that raid. But what was he doing? He was hiring these Mexicans and doing them a favor, in effect, by hiring them, but paying them off the books. So he was also doing himself a favor. Is that Mettā or Maitrī? I don't think so. He was doing himself a favor. He could pay them low wages. I don't know how low, but that's a characteristic thing that happens in the Rio Grande Valley of Texas. People hire or have hired undocumented Mexicans to work in their places so they could pay them low wages. And that's exactly what he was doing. I consider him still to be a friend, although maybe I shouldn't. I am not proud of what he did. I'm happy for the Mexicans that he helped, but I know why he did it. He did it to allow his business to survive. He was not trying, I don't think, maybe I shouldn't judge, but from what he said, I don't think he was trying to help out the Mexicans. He was trying to help out himself, because when I spoke with him, what he complained about was himself. And again, how he might have to shut his place down because he can no longer hire undocumented Mexicans. He said, now Border Patrol is watching me. In case you didn't know, Border Patrol itself is extremely corrupt. Every month, there is a list of Border Patrol agents who have been arrested for receiving money from the Mexican drug cartels. Every month. Police officers, same thing. Mayors, same thing. They are on the take. They receive payola from the drug cartels. There are virtual castles right near me. And Border Patrol knows that those castles are there, but they don't bother them because they pay off the Border Patrol not to bother them. That's the way things work here in the Rio Grande Valley of Texas. If you have the money, if you have the power, if you have the ability to pay off people, whether police officers, Border Patrol agents, or mayors, you can get by. And so I know exactly where these Mexican cartel members live, right here in Mission, Texas. I know exactly where their mansions are, and I'm sure Border Patrol knows as well, and yet they do nothing about it because they are on the take. Just like people on the Mexican side are on the take, there is virtually no government in Mexico because the government is owned by the cartels. There's virtually no police in Mexico because the police, every single police officer, is owned by the cartels. Why? Because the salary of a person working in Mexico is inevitably going to be relatively low. But the cartels can pay people a lot of money. And so it is very, very tempting to be on the take. So it is bad here in the Rio Grande Valley, but it is much worse right across the Rio Grande River on the Mexican side. Much, much worse. I'm not even sure if there is a comparison how bad it is. If you go there, if you live there, you might have your head cut off. Somebody may knock on your door from the cartels and say, you have 20 minutes to get out. And you better get out. Because if you don't, in 20 minutes, they will come back and in gangland style, shoot everyone in the house and take the house for themselves. And you think, well, wouldn't somebody arrest them? Who? Who would arrest them? The police are owned by the cartels, which means that, in effect, there is basically no police in much of Mexico. There is nobody you can turn to, nobody at all. You need to watch out for yourself. I am not quite in that situation here, so I'm grateful. I can walk outside, I can walk around, and I'm not worried about having my head chopped off or a finger chopped off, sent to a relative demanding a ransom. That is very unlikely to happen here. But if I traveled, for example, to the city of Reynosa, which is right near me, I am only 2 miles from Mexico, and Reynosa is just a short drive down from there. That might very well happen. Now, if somebody would pay the ransom, they might release me. They might, but they might not either. They might keep me and demand an additional ransom. And by that time, I may be dead already. So they can demand one ransom after another ransom, after another, all the time I was killed, perhaps from the beginning. So as a result, most Americans, including Mexican Americans, do not travel to most of Mexico, especially places like Reynosa and other cities right on the Mexican-US border. It is a tragedy. It is a real tragedy, not for Americans, because as an American, I can say, okay, I will simply go to the safe places. And there are safe places that I go to, places like Nuevo Progreso, safe. You're not going to have your fingers cut off or your head chopped off. No, not in Nuevo Progreso. It is a tourist town. But why is it safe? It is safe because the cartels are paid off not to bother primarily American and some Canadian and other tourists who travel into Nuevo Progreso, because that is a major source of income for the country of Mexico. So, getting back to the original idea, Mettā, Pali, Maitrī, Sanskrit, cognates for loving kindness or compassion. I want to have that loving kindness or compassion. I long for it, but I think sometimes that it has escaped me, meaning I don't have enough of it. I have some, but nowhere near as much as I should have. Whenever I realize that I spend even a part of the day thinking about myself, that's when I realize that I have not paid enough attention to the suffering of people in Mexico and in other parts of the third world. Because, again, however bad my problems may seem, they are no comparison whatsoever to the people on the other side of the Rio Grande River. For the time being, this has been Mark by Mark A. Foster, Ph.D., for the Institute for Dialectical Meta-Realism. Have a pleasant day and an even better day tomorrow.